All right, so the instructions say find the slope of a line parallel to the given line. So if two lines are parallel, what do you think about the skiing experience for two skiers that are one here and one here? They're never going to touch each other, but they're going to have pretty much the same skiing experience unless there's trees in the way in one path and not in the other. Okay, that would be a different if they had to slalom or do something like that. But if the slope is the same, if the two lines are parallel, the slope is the same. Slopes are equal. Okay? So when you look at all of those equations, if the lines are parallel, you just write down the slope of that line because the other line's going to have the same slope. Everybody understand that? The first one says y equals negative 7/4 x minus 3. And if this other line is parallel to this line, then this slope is going to be negative 7/4. That's like silly easy, the first. So if two lines are perpendicular, that means that they form a 90-degree angle with each other. And the slopes of those two lines are going to be, there's two words you have to remember. Does anybody know those two words? The slopes are opposite, reciprocal. All right? So this solid blue line here, is the slope going to be positive or negative? Positive, because it goes from the bottom up to the top, right? It's going to be a great ski day for the monkey, remember? So it's a positive slope. So let's say the slope is 3/2. Let's say the slope is positive 3/2. Okay, that's the opposite. Very good. You have to do two things to this slope in order to get the right answer. You have to change its sign. If it's negative, it goes to positive. If it's positive, it goes to negative. And you have to flip it. So we're going to take 3/2, and if we need to find the opposite reciprocal, notice I'm not putting an equal sign but an arrow, because if they're not equal, it's negative 2/3. Okay? Let's say we have the opposite reciprocal of negative 3. What do you think?
It's positive
1/3. And what I do with whole numbers is I put a 1 underneath it. So I'm flipping it and changing the sign. Do you see how we flipped it to 1/3 and changed the sign? Everybody get that? The opposite reciprocal of negative 3 is 1/3. What's the opposite reciprocal of negative 1/5? Plain 5. Perfect. Because it's going to be 5/1 and then goes from negative to positive. So you go, make sure you do two things. The biggest mistake made with perpendicular is that they flip it or they change the sign, but they don't do both. That's the biggest mistake I see on papers, okay? So if you can do two things, you're good. So I'm going to write down the first one. 2x minus y equals 4. So standard form. This is in standard form. So it's the x, then the y, then the equal sign, then the plain number. Everybody understand what standard form looks like? Okay. There's a trick to finding the slope of a standard form equation. And that is you take this number over this number in front of the y, and then you change its sign. So it's 2 over negative 1, but it's the opposite of that, which is
1/2.
No, you don't flip it. It's just 2. So if the slope of this guy is plane 2, then the slope of anything parallel to it is also plane 2. You don't have to change it. You only have to change the perpendicular ones, not the parallel. That concept is hard for some kids to grasp. So let's look at this another way. And you're welcome to... So you can also leave the y alone, and when you leave the y alone, you will get the right answer if you like doing it this way. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides because I need to move him to the other side. I want to leave the y alone. And I have negative y equals, always put the x first. Everybody see what I did? And then you divide everything by -1 because the y is not alone yet if it has a minus sign on it. So we get y equals 2x minus 4. Does everybody see what I did? What's the slope of that equation? 2. See how you get the same thing?
Yeah, so
Whenever you're leaving the y alone, the y has to be alone. A negative in front of the y still has something hanging off of it, okay? It needs to be totally naked. Just a plain y. So on the first one, if you just did the trick that I showed you at the beginning, you put the guy next to the x over the guy next to the y, and then you change its sign. So the slope of this equation is negative 5 halves. But now you have to find the opposite reciprocal because you're looking for the perpendicular slope. So you flip it and change the sign. Now if you were to leave the y alone, you would get 2y equals negative 5x plus 6. Do you see I just took the 5x and subtracted it over here? And then divide everything by 2. And we get that y equals negative 5 halves x plus 3. Well, the slope is negative 5 halves, and then you have to find the opposite reciprocal. Don't forget to find the opposite reciprocal if you're doing perpendicular, okay? If you have an equation, x equals a number, let's say x equals 6, okay? You go to 6, and it could be 6, 0, 6, 1, 6, 2, 6, 3, 6, negative 1, right? All we know is that x equals 6. Well, this would form a vertical line. Does everybody see that?
yeah.
What is the slope of a vertical line?
Oh, undefined.
Undefined. What is the reciprocal of undefined?
0.
There you go. What is the reciprocal of 0?
0.
Undefined. Got it? Now, if I were to write this equation in standard form, I would have 1x plus 0y. Do you see any y's there? Equals, you see what I did? I just put 1x plus 0y equals 6, right? Well, the slope of this guy would be 1 over 0 and then change the sign. Remember the trick? Well, when 0 is in the basement, what does that mean? Undefined. That's the other way to look at it. You don't have a y, so you put 0y. Okay? If you have a horizontal line, let's say at -3, y equals -3, a horizontal line is a y equals a number, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, this would be a 0 slope. What's the opposite reciprocal of 0? Undefined. You see that?